This cookie decorating series I'm calling for the red, white, and blue. I learned a lot from my first experience of decorating a planned series of cookies, which, let's be honest, was not very well planned at all. I mean, the only thing I really planned was what cutters am I using and what colors am I using. When you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and that is absolutely what happened. And in one way, it wasn't a failure because I learned a lot about myself and a lot about my methods. And so now I have put together a new series that is based off of the red, white, and blue colors, and they're all going to be in the shape of a heart. So in the most untechy way I could possibly come up with, by using graph paper, pencil, pens, and a ruler, I actually planned out what it is I'm going to do this time. So since I am most definitely a beginner, or what we like to call around here a pre-professional, I focused on what I think is going to be the most bang for my buck when it comes to my design and what particular techniques I'm going to use. So the plan I came up with is this. I'm going to use one shape, and in this case it's going to be a heart. I will be using a 2 consistency outline and flood. I will be using a soft peak piping consistency for the outline, or at least I hope it's a soft peak consistency. And I will be using a thin flood, which is what maybe would be called maybe like a 10-second flood. Although I have my doubts on my blue. My blue is really, really, really loose. I'm kind of glad that there's a lot in the bag because I foresee a lot of it just flowing out onto my table. I have prepared 6 designs for this series. 4 of the designs will be completed in one step with no drying time needed in between steps. It'll be one and done. The other 2 designs will have 2 stages. I will flood and do some of the decorating, and then I will put it into my dehydrator for about 15 minutes or so, let the top layer become smooth, not tacky, and what they call a crust on the top, and then I will use my piping consistency to complete the design. Most of the designs feature a wet on wet technique or a wet next to wet technique. I do have just a little bit of piping in this design series, as well as a little tiny bit of pressure piping, and I will be using sanding sugar on one of my cookies. I'm going to attempt to narrate as I decorate. Now, I have never done this, and I'm not sure if I can do it. So I'm going to attempt to do that, but you will know in a few minutes when I start decorating whether or not I was actually able to narrate through my decorating, or whether or not I had to go and do a voiceover, which, to be honest with you, is its own challenge that I am not exactly looking forward to. My name is Cooney, and this is Cooney's Cookie Chronicles. The tools that I'm going to be using today are a scribe to help move around my flood icing, an edible ink marker so that I can mark on the cookie exactly what design I intend to put on the cookie. Now, this is not the kind of edible marker that I have seen used in many of the videos that I've watched. It is black and it's very, very dark, and I'm just hoping that my white icing covers the edible marker. I will also be using a Lazy Susan for my cookie, the silicone mat that is underneath, and I will be using paper towels to wipe off my scribe. I'm not sure if I mentioned the dehydrator, but I will definitely be using my dehydrator to help dry my cookies efficiently to be able to get the best outcomes. I have 6 designs that I have pre-planned. I sure hope that they come out at least halfway of what it is I'm thinking in my brain that they should look like. I already don't have the colors saturated to the degree that I had originally planned in my head, so little learning curve to go with that one. Lots of opportunity. So my first design is called United or Divided. So I'm first going to mark on my cookie, figure out which end. I think I want to use the smaller end here. I'm going to mark on my cookie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. I hope this works out okay. We'll see how this goes. Learning curve for everything. So as I'm marking this up, I want to lightly put a line across the surface of the cookie. And I need 5 lines. I don't want to mark all the way to the edge of the cookie so that I don't run the risk of not being able to flood my cookie all the way around and cover up all of the edible ink. I need 5 lines. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I need 4 lines. All right, so we're definitely not in the perfect category here. We're gonna have a nice big clump of red at the bottom, I think. But it is our first go at this. My notes say that I'm going to outline this in white. So I need to cut open my bag. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm looking, there's a seam that runs down the side of the bag and I've got it facing straight up. I don't recall exactly why it is you need to have it straight up when you cut it off, but I'm going to cut off just a little tiny bit off the end. It's not a lot. And then I'm going to put the seam in the palm of my hand. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case either, but this is our outlining consistency. And I'm going to start, typically you would start not on a curve, but on this cookie, there's not much of an area that's not a curve. And I'm going to, I did not intend to flood to the edge. I'm gonna leave myself some room. There we go. And my notes say that my top layer is going to be red. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm gonna go ahead and open up my red icing as well. I'm gonna put a little line where that first line is. Now as I draw this line, I have my bag lifted off of the surface. You have the best control when you lift off of the surface to make your line. And it just kind of lays down all by itself. Our next section is a blue line. Now you see those little squiggles there? Those little squiggles happen because the speed I am using to move my line across with my bag and the amount of pressure that I was using didn't match up perfectly. And so that's how you get squiggles. I have way too much icing in this blue bag. And then we're gonna go back to our red. Looks like I might have over flooded just a little bit here. And blue. No squiggles that time. Our icing is nice and puffy. It seems like the consistency that I came up with is actually working out just fine. Now you see, I am putting these lines next to each other. I need to drag a little bit to the edge here while it's still a little bit wet. A little bit over here too. So these lines that I put next to each other while they're still wet, they kind of bleed together, and that is exactly what I want. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this into the dehydrator and let it sit for at least 15 minutes in the dehydrator. And then we'll come back and do the next step. Now my second design I am calling Shining Flag. I'm going to attempt to draw onto the surface of the cookie basically 3 waves and do a red, a white, and a blue. And then I'm going to, while it is still wet, cover it with sanding sugar. So it'll be one of our one and done steps. One and done cookies. I am not the greatest drawer in the world, so we'll see how this goes. Not too bad. I will also be outlining this one in each section in its own color. So on this one, the top is red. So I'm gonna grab my piping consistency and I am going to see how that comes out. Okay, now we flood. And I'm going to use my scribe. This flood is a little thicker than I thought it would be. I guess I didn't get it as thin as I thought I got it, but it is definitely nice and puffy. And hopefully we won't get any craters. Guess I don't need to be too super careful on this one since I'm going to be putting sanding sugar on the top. So now, let's see how this goes. I'm going to outline our second section in white. Oh, that was silly. Should have been curvy. I'm flooding right up to that edge so that it can get right up next to that red, and so it can blend together. Now I put a rather small hole at the bottom of that white bag, and so it took quite a bit of pressure to make it come out in that flooded manner. Now, one of the things I'm definitely not doing on this cookie is flooding to the edge, because once I go to put the sanding sugar on the top, it is going to weigh down the icing on my cookie. It kind of looks like a Pepsi can. I think I'm gonna rename this one Pepsi, the choice of a new generation. So now I've got my sanding sugar, and I'm going to sand the top of this with the sugar. And we should be able to see right underneath it. So this has now officially become the Pepsi cookie. So I'm gonna turn that over, and that is our Pepsi cookie. Now this cookie is gonna be a real challenge because I am going to attempt to make something that kind of has the feel of tie-dye. It's not exactly tie-dye. So we're gonna be doing some wet next to wet, and I am going to be using my scribe to rough up the surface in order to give it that kind of psychedelic tie-dye look. So I'm calling this cookie groovy, man. It doesn't look like much now. I hope it looks better. I hope it looks better when I'm done with it. I will be outlining in white. Starting here. I believe on all of these cookies, I intend to leave some space around the edge. That ensures that I will not have as much of a problem of possibly spilling over the edge. And again, as I pull the line, I'm about maybe 1/4 of an inch off of the surface, and that allows me control. So now, flooding up to the edge here. That's all right. I'm going to use my scribe to encourage the flood icing into the little corner here, and then here as well. Now, I do run the risk of having craters in these areas because they are so small, but I'm not going to try to mitigate craters for this particular series because I'm just trying to get my way with knowing how to handle everything. So the next section is white. The thing when you're flooding is what you're trying to do is you're trying to get really close to the surface so that the icing is kind of pushed down onto the surface, but you're not touching the surface. If you touch the surface, you kind of scrape the bag against the cookie and it kind of flattens out rather than kind of bubbles up around the edges. And so this icing, which is really nice and puffy, kind of flows upward, so to speak. Now, here I am going to start manipulating the icing. And as I do this, I am not cleaning off my scribe. And it's not exactly doing what I had hoped for, but I think my icing is actually thicker than I thought it was. So that's good to know. But it's something. All right, I'm gonna do the blue in the middle here. Ooh, I guess I probably should go ahead and put a line down here. Uh-oh. I'm having issues with that particular bluing, laying down the lines nicely. So here I flood. Again, leaving the bag just a little above the surface as I squeeze. The thing with wet on wet is you have to work pretty fast. And I am definitely not fast, at least at this point. I do get a little faster every time I attempt to make and decorate more cookies. And here, again, manipulating the icing. Being careful not to scratch the cookie, which I'll be honest with you, I have scratched many times already, trying not to scratch. It's interesting. And then I need to do white in this section here. When you do an outline and flood, you have the option whether or not you let the icing for the outline dry before you do any of your decorating. Now, I personally would prefer not to let it dry because you can see it. It doesn't meld in with the flood icing that you put on top of it as nicely. And you know, like right here, I'm getting a little bit of, it's already a little bit dry, so it's causing a little bit of a surface tension there, kind of icky. Good thing is I'm going to get in there and put some red icing and rough it all up, and we'll see how it comes out. But you don't have to wait for it to dry. It's a personal choice. See, I got some wobbly bits there because I lifted the bag up too high. It's really funny. I really thought I had a really thin flood. I guess not. So. I don't know how groovy that cookie is, but it's something. I definitely can see on this cookie that there's a dip in the surface. Like I've got much more flood icing here than I do here in the red than I do with the white, or the white is not as puffy. So we'll have to see how that comes out. Now, when you move your cookies around after you decorate them and getting them in and out of the dehydrator, you have to be really careful not to tip the cookie, because the top layer has a little bit of a crust on it, but everything underneath is still very, very wet, so it kind of sloshes around. I definitely have had issues in the past with tipping the cookie or moving it around, jostling it too much, and getting cracks on the surface of my cookie. Cooking in number 4, I'm calling up or down. So again, I'm going to draw on my cookie. I think I pretty much draw on all the cookies. But it looks like so far that this marker is working out just fine, and I'm not noticing that I can see the marker through the white. The white is very thick, so I think we're good there. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines on this one. So we're going to start here. Again, I'm not going to draw them all the way to the edge. Once again, I'll be outlining in white. Oh no, I broke a line. Let's see what I can do here. Surgeon General coming in. I'm not entirely sure why I did that, because I am doing a wet on wet here. This is not, I have no idea what I'm doing. All right, let's try this again. Mark the cookie for nothing. Okay, starting with a red line. I'm gonna lay a red line and a red line. No, my pressure was wrong. And a red line. And then I'm gonna do 3. Oh, I picked the wrong, that's not gonna go so well. I picked up the wrong bag. Darn it. And a blue line. And a blue line. And a blue line. This is not gonna work out well because I used the wrong icing on that red. And I'm going to go up. And then up on this one. And up in the middle. And then I'm going to go down. And then down again. This one almost looks more like a heartbeat. I may have to change this one to heartbeat. Red on the top, white in the middle, blue on the bottom. So red on the top. I'm going to outline each section in its own color. So, here. There's my flood. Now I've got my red down. Just trying to settle it a little bit. And then we're gonna go in with our white. Right up against that edge, trying to get a nice little seam there. Now you may notice that I put my 2 fingers from my left hand onto the bag as I'm flooding, and that actually helps me to stabilize the bag just a little bit. Oh no, got a little bit of red. Okay, so here I'm going to be putting 5 dots at the top here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll see what that does. And I'm gonna settle the dots just a little bit here, and then I'm gonna run my scribe through it and see how that looks. Oh, I rather enjoy that. That looks nice. And then on the bottom, I am going to do the blue. You know, it's funny, when I bagged all this icing, I thought, oh no, that blue is so loose. And you know, the one that's running out is the red flood. Kind of interesting. A little bit more. Just pull out the edges here. I am liking this cookie. Let's see. And then now I'm gonna take my red flat icing that's all over the table. Well, not the one that's all over the table, but the one that's getting all over the table. And I'm gonna put 3 dots at the bottom. They're not exactly spaced very well. So when I put these dots on here, basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of pressing the tip of the bag into the surface of the icing, and it's kind of injecting the icing into the layer that's already there. That did not, I didn't leave myself enough space here. So next cookie I try, hopefully that'll come out a little bit better, but I'm really rather satisfied with this cookie. That is cookie number 5. We are on to our last cookie, which is actually going to be the most difficult of all the cookies that I'm doing. Save the best for last. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need 5 lines, 6 sections. We'll see how this goes. Once again, I'm going to mark onto my cookie. One. Two. I need 5 lines, 6 sections. 3. 4 and 5. I'm going to outline the whole cookie in white. To get that little point at the bottom, I touched the cookie down and I touch it down again there, and that gives it a little bit more of a point. Okay, so our first section is red. Make sure I grab the right icing this time. Using my scribe to just get it right to the edge. And again, I run the risk of craters, but I am not concerned about craters at this point for me. I just want to practice the technique and I can troubleshoot and fix it later. And I have to remember which one's which. Now we're gonna go with white. A little bit of red on my scribe. I thought it was cleaned off, I guess not. I do find that for the most part, when I pick up a bag, I have to wipe the tip off and I just basically squeeze the end of the bag in between 2 pieces of paper towel. And now our first blue section. I think my blue outline is a little thicker than I intended it to be. Because I am definitely having a hard time laying down a line nicely with that outline consistency without it squiggling. I gotta work a little bit fast in this section because I am intending to make some stars. So I intend 7 stars across each of these blue sections. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to attempt to make them look like stars. I am wiping off my scribe each pull. I'm not doing a very good job of wiping off my scribe. I think next time I will use something wet to wipe off this scribe. Yeah, I really think my consistencies could have been looser. Having a hard time here. They sort of look like stars. Let me nudge this back in here. Well, that's something. Let's see, another round of red. Another round of white. The last blue. There you go. That's stars and stripes. Not quite as many stars as I originally intended. I intended stars on the bottom as well, but that clearly I did not have enough space for that. Now back to our first of our two-step designs. I'm going to be piping some white lines in between each of the lines that are on the connecting lines on here. So let's see how how well I can do that. Oops, had a little trouble there. Oh, I'm having a hard time seeing my line. If when you pipe your line, you have a little glob at the edge, it just means that you have icing on the tip of your bag before you started to lay down your line. So what I'm doing here is just cutting off the edges of the lines. Probably could have gone a little further on that one. Now I wonder if I could put a little bit of the edge around here and make it look better. Let's try that. I'm gonna try that. I think this is called like a shell technique. It's not a very good shell, but I'm pressure piping. I push out, then I pull, and then I kind of vary the pressure as or at least I'm supposed to be. I don't think this is going like it's supposed to, but hey, we'll go with it. Oh, it doesn't look bad. We'll take it. Now this is the last step of all the cookies that we have. I need to pipe some dots onto here. So on the top of this cookie, I'm going to use my piping consistency, and I'm going to put 3 dots. So I just push the bag down toward the cookie as I press the bag, and then it creates, and then I pull up, but when I pull up it creates these little tiny nubs on the top. And so I just take my scribe and get rid of those little dots. And then I'm going to take my red piping consistency and I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom here. Didn't leave myself quite as much space as I thought I was going to. I'm going to a couple of dots down there. Now I got, I should have cleaned off my bag. And then I'm going to just use the white to kind of make a few little dots here and there all over the cookie. Kind of like little pearls. Now settle them just a little bit. And that's it. That's the last of the first round of cookies that I am making for the red, white, and blue series.
Next time on Cooney's Cookie Chronicles.
I have put together a new series that is based off of the red, white, and blue colors, pencil, pens, and a ruler. I'm going to use one shape. I'm going to attempt to narrate as I decorate. I want to lightly put a line across the surface of the cookie, trying to get really close to the surface so that the icing is kind of pushed down onto the surface, but you're not touching the surface. Really funny, I really thought I had a really thin flood. I guess not. Oh, I picked the wrong, that's not gonna go so well. I picked up the wrong bag. Because I am definitely having a hard time laying down a line nicely with that outline consistency without it squiggling. I'm going to attempt to make them look like stars.